Hi, I'm John Gamble, founder and principal of Tenacity Incorporated.
And I'm Steve Wurzbacher, also a principal in Tenacity. And we welcome you to this video of the transition meeting. The transition meeting is a very important step in the Clients for Life client retention process. It helps us be true and obey the commandment to always start the contract according to the client's expectations. And the transition meeting has that name for a very specific purpose, because in the process of selling new business and contracting for new business, the transition meeting represents that important handoff from sales to operations.
So with that, let's get started. Jan, Marty, Bonnie, thanks for doing this. We very much appreciate your time and your willingness to participate in this with us. Randy, Steve, and I certainly appreciate the time you're going to invest with us today. This is all about us understanding your expectations of Tenacity and then sharing Tenacity's expectations of you. So what we're going to do today is spend a bit of time asking you to share your expectations with us. And in that regard, we're going to ask you to share those expectations in a kind of a unique way. We're going to ask you to follow an acronym that we use, and we refer to it as SAM. S stands for specific. When you share those expectations with us, we'd like you to do it in as specific a way as you can. And M simply stands for measurable. I think we can all agree that what we can measure, we can get done. And so to the extent that we understand how you will measure us on the achievement of that expectation, it'll help us better understand how to characterize those expectations you have of us. Okay? So specific and measurable. So what I'd like to do is hand you a couple of cards, Marty, and would you pass those along to Bonnie? And on this card, I'd like you to write 30 days. Just on the top of that card, write 30 days. And if you would, write down the expectations you have of Tenacity in the first 30 days of us working together. So 30 days from today, what will we have accomplished? Now, you've just seen the first aspects of the transition meeting. And there are a couple of things I'd like to point out to you. Incidentally, these are all covered in your workbook, but they're so vitally important that I want to take time to mention them now. The first question you have to ask yourself is where to have this meeting. Should we have it at the client's location or should we have it at an external location? And there are pluses and minuses to each of those as described in the workbook. But please take time to consider those pluses and minuses before you make that decision. The second thing that you want us to consider is how to set the table up once you're inside the room. And incidentally, make sure there's enough room inside the room. Don't leave that to chance. If you can, get there before the meeting takes place to verify that you're going to have a comfortable set of surroundings with enough wall space to use the flip charts. When you set up the table, make sure that all the clients aren't on one side of the table and all of your individuals are on the other side of the table. Take the time to put the cards so that each person in the web of influence is sitting next to their respective counterpart. Incidentally, the meeting is only as good as the people in the room. So make sure that you have the client's web of influence represented in the room. Once you've done that, recognize that you only have a couple of hours to do this meeting, so use your time appropriately.
The amount of time to schedule for the transition meeting is really a minimum of 2 hours. You can use the rule of thumb that it will take between 20 and 25 minutes for each person on the client side of the desk that is in attendance. Now, when the expectations are being elicited around the room, it's important to remember that those expectations must be framed in ways that are both specific and measurable. If I was to give you an expectation that would say, I want you to reduce costs, that's not specific and it's not measurable. A specific and measurable expectation has to say, how much will the cost be reduced by? What is the current baseline that we're measuring against? and what is the time period that that cost reduction needs to take place. So all of the elicitation and the clarifying of expectations that we'll go through and that you'll see in the video are all designed to make those clients' expectations both specific and measurable. And that's the reason that the acronym SAM, S-A-M, is used in this context.
Now, before we get back to the video, there's one other thing that I'd like to cover with you, and that is the rationale for 30 days, 90 days, and 1 year during the transition meeting. It's vitally important that we cover those elements in time for this reason. Number one, 30 days. Clients are really concerned what happens now that the selling is over and operations begin. Will those promises that sales made turn into realities from an operating standpoint? So they're going to be looking at what happens within the first 30 days of the association together. 90 days is important because it's a quarterly check, and people in industry are used to quarterly performance reports. And then ultimately, we want to take a look at 1 year and how we're performing relative to the expectations 1 year into the relationship. So those 30, 90, and 1 year expectations are at the root of our relationship with the client. All right, I can see everybody's finished with 30 days. What I'd like to do is hand out one more card. And if you could pass those along. Thanks, Marty. And on this card, if you would write 90 days on the top. And just as you did with the 30-day card, if you would write your expectations of tenacity over the first 90 days of our association together. So thinking 3 months ahead, what will we have accomplished together over that 90-day period? And I see we've completed the 90-day thoughts, and this will be the final card that we're going to pass along. Thanks again, Jan, for passing those down to Marty and Bonnie. And on this final card, I would appreciate it if you would label it 1 year. So thinking ahead on the first anniversary of our working together, what will we have accomplished? What are your expectations over our first year together? If you'd capture those, again, thinking about being as specific as you can be and making sure that we can measure the expectations that you share with us.
From this point forward, you'll notice that everybody on the tenacity side will have a role to play in the transition meeting. And from now on, all we'll be doing is asking questions of the clients. The roles that each person from tenacity should adopt should be agreed to in advance and are part of the pre-session planning. One person might be a good note taker, and they'll be the one to take the notes. Somebody should certainly be assigned to watching the client's reactions and understanding what the interpersonal dynamics are between them and who reacts positively or negatively to certain aspects of the expectations that are brought up. It's important that the facilitator maintain control of the meeting, but now everyone's involved, and they're involved in making sure those expectations become specific and measurable. And they'll do that through asking clarifying questions and restating things that the client has said. There are some very good phrases that can be used, and they're always the go-to phrases. How will you measure that? How will you know when that expectation has been achieved? Can you tell me more? Can you make that more specific? Those are the kinds of things to keep in mind as we keep the meeting moving forward.
That completes the writing, and thank you very much for that. If you would, take out your 30-day card. And Jan, we're going to start with you if that's okay. I'd like you to share one of your 30-day expectations with us.
I expect that you'll do what's necessary to learn about our company and our business and our clients, what we do, who we do it for, what the issues are that we're facing, and that you'll demonstrate your understanding in some way.
Jan, I'm wondering, how will you make sure that we do that? What will you be measuring to ensure that that expectation is met?
I suppose seeing you interview our people, asking relevant questions and so forth. And you're also going to be doing a couple of post-mortem audits, aren't you?
That's right, Jan. In the first 30 days, we will have conducted 2 post-mortem audits. So if I heard you correctly, it's all about tenacity, getting familiar with NewCo, understanding its people, its culture, and the challenges that you face. Is that correct?
Correct.
Jan, just let me capture that.
Scribing the expectations on the flip chart is a very important part of the process. You know, we'll often get the question, is it okay for someone else on the tenacity side of the table to do the scribing while the facilitator just does the talking? That really doesn't work as well, and we would want to avoid that. It's important for that facilitator to go to the chart and capture what is being said. That both flatters and acknowledges the person and encourages them to continue to contribute. So capture what is being said and using the facilitating and the clarifying skills later to make it more specific.
So your expectation is that tenacity understands people, culture, challenges facing NewCos, plus we've accomplished our first 2 post-mortem audits. All right. Bonnie, how about if we move on to you, and would you share one of your 30-day expectations with us?
Well, I would think that within the first 30 days, you would have completed the elements of our client retention strategy, especially right clients, right terms. We would want to know by then which of our existing clients fit and which don't, and maybe some sort of an action plan about what to do about those that don't fit.
You know, Bonnie, I heard 3 expectations there. The first, that we would have completed the right clients, right terms facilitations with senior management, and that the criteria would be in place and agreed to. Second, that we would look at the existing book of business and determine which of our clients are in compliance and which are out. And third, for those clients that are out of compliance with right clients, right terms, that we would have action plans in place to bring them back into compliance. Did I hear you correctly on that?
Yes, you did, although I see that maybe the action plan, we might not be able to complete it in 30 days, so why don't we just leave that part off?
You know, Bonnie, if that's the case, may I suggest that you just take that expectation and move it into another column?
Okay, I'll move that to my 90-day list.
So Bonnie, I just want to make sure that I've captured it correctly. Within the first 30 days, it's all about getting the right clients, right terms criteria completed, and then making sure that there's a format so that you can understand who's in compliance and who's not.
That's right.
Now, as we get back to the video, we've skipped over the 90-day list. But you will see as we start the 1-year list that we're going to use the very same process. However, we're going to start with somebody new and go around the table in a different direction, just so that we're not seen as showing and playing any favorites. And now it's time for us to turn our attention to the 1-year list. So if you would take out your 1-year cards, and Marty, this time we're going to start with you. Will you share one of your 1-year expectations with us?
Well, John, I guess we expect to see results. I'd like to see our lost accounts be down by 50% at least.
Marty, results are so critical, so it's really important that we're on the same page as to how you'll measure that. When you mention lost accounts, are you talking about number of accounts? Are you talking about managed revenue? What will be the measuring stick to get to that 50%?
I hope you can see how much I, as session leader, appreciate my team helping me get the clients to focus on their expectations and express them in specific and measurable ways. Let's get back to the video. All right, I just want to make sure that we're in agreement. So we've said that the total attrition will be measured in Tenacity's first year of engagement, and that's from now until December 31st. That will be at 1/2 the prior year rate based on total revenue. Is that correct? All right, since we're in agreement, Bonnie, let's go to you.
Well, you know, there's a lot going on in our industry right now, especially from a regulatory and legislative point of view. And when these changes happen, they happen quickly and can easily impact our ability to retain our clients. So what I'd like is for Tenacity to monitor this for us from a legislative point of view, both the changes proposed and enacted, and then to prepare short briefs periodically, maybe monthly, to review and share with us and its potential impact on our ability to retain our clients.
The third tenacity commandment says, expect your clients to have expectations that you didn't expect they would have. Well, we weren't expecting this one. This one was just way off the wall and not something that had ever been talked about in the run-up to the transition meeting. But you have to expect these things to happen. The important thing is how we react, or in this case, don't react to an expectation that is this far off the beaten track. Remember, we're here just to capture the client's expectations, no matter how far out of left field it might be. So we don't react, we don't respond, we don't emote. We capture, clarify, make that expectation specific, and move on.
Now, I'm looking to quantify a specific economic return. I have difficulty a lot of times with leadership training and so forth where you really can't point to a specific return on your investment. Now, I know a lot of this is up to us, but I expect we should receive at least a $2 return for every dollar invested in this training.
So Marty, let me make sure that I understand. You're suggesting that the investment in tenacity, that's total fees and expenses, over the first 12-month period would be returned to you at a rate of 2 to 1 based on our ability to reduce your attrition rate.
Right.
Now, just to make sure we're starting from the same starting point or baseline, as my notes indicated, currently your attrition rate is 9.6%, which means that you're losing approximately $2.2 million every year, correct?
Yes.
So Marty, to the degree to which we impact your lost accounts, you're expecting that the recovery of those lost profits during the first year will equal twice your actual dollar investment in tenacity. Is that what you're saying? John is going to continue to elicit the one-year expectations until they've all been captured, scribed, made specific, and made measurable. Now it's time to move to prioritize those expectations. And that's really important because we're asking the participants at the table now to put on their company hat, to leave their individual expectations aside and think about what is most important for the corporation at large. So there's a specific technique to do that, but it's important to remember that the individuals attending this meeting are probably hearing one another's expectations for the first time, and they may realize that there are some things outside of their own particular set of interests that are important for the corporation. When we prioritize expectations, we realize that expectations number 1 and 2 are going to be particularly important in each list. Frankly, if we don't do expectation number 5 or number 4, that's probably not a deal breaker. We're probably not going to get fired for that. But we will get fired for not doing expectations 1 and 2. It's important now to understand what those 1 and 2 expectations are on each list.
Thanks. That was a great start. We've captured your individual expectations. And as important as they are, it's now time for us to understand how you prioritize those expectations. So if you would, take the colored marker that we've placed in front of you, and in a moment, I'm going to ask you to go to the wall and select 3 expectations in each of the time frames. So 3 in 30 days, 3 in 90, 3 in 1 year. And give us your sense of what's most important. Now, as important as your individual expectations are, this is the time for us to understand how you collectively would prioritize what you've heard discussed. All right, it's time to put your company hat on now. So, colored markers in hand, let's go to the walls. Now, once the clients have shared their priorities with us, it's time to gently get them out of the room. And the way to do that is to simply have a break set up outside where they can refresh themselves. Once they're out of the room, it's time for us to consider their priorities. In that regard, we have 4 possible responses. We can do it as expressed, we can ask for a little more time, we can ask for more resources, and or we can tell them we simply can't meet their expectation.
And remember, we're only going to be dealing with the expectations that they have identified as their priorities, not every single expectation on the list. Once we've decided among the 4 choices that John has just given us, we are going to confront those expectations when the clients re-enter the room in a few minutes. Some of those expectations we may just be saying to them, we can't do this, or we can't do this without some significant modification or time delay. But when you think about it, the time to do this is now. That's why the timing of the transition meeting is so important. We couldn't have those confrontive conversations if we had already started operations, or indeed, even if we already had a signed contract. If we can't get the client's agreement to the expectations that we know we can and can't meet at this stage, we have to renegotiate or rethink the entire relationship. We're going to start this contract according to the client's expectations.
How about this expectation on ROI? First year, 2 to 1. What do you guys think?
Yeah, John, Randy, we have to be careful here. We've gotten ourselves into this situation before. At the end of the first year, right clients, right terms won't have had a chance to take any real full effect. We will just have the criteria in place. In the same way, the attitude and action training will only be finished throughout about the 3rd quarter. Yeah. So all the account management training will not have been completed.
I think that's right, Steve. The more I think about it, the more I think we'll only have 5 or 6 training sessions done by the end of the first year. And that's not enough time to get the economic impact of the account management progress that we're just starting to make into the books. Why don't we ask them to slide the whole thing to the end of the 2nd year? We pledge a 2 to 1 return on their investment in Tenacity at the end of the 2nd year, not the 1st.
So you guys are saying 2nd year, 2 to 1, not 1st year.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Me too.
Good?
Yep.
Good deal.
This process will continue until all of the client's prioritized expectations have been addressed. And they've been addressed with one of the 4 choices that John gave us earlier. But now the transition is complete. Operations has agreed to the expectations that have been expressed with the modifications that we may have built into those expectations. But sales has handed off now to operations a right client under the right terms. Now our job is to work with the client as they re-enter the room to make sure that those expectations can be agreed to in a specific and measurable way.
Well, thanks for returning so promptly. We certainly appreciate that. This has been such a useful session for us and hopefully for you. And you know that Tenacity will not begin an agreement unless we're committed to the fact that we can absolutely deliver on the expectations that you have of us. And in that regard, what I'd like to do is review the expectations that you have prioritized in each of these categories. So let's take a look first, if we may, at the 30-day category. To complete the right clients, right terms, lessons learned, and have those documents available to you. As you indicated in your discussion with us, you can absolutely be assured that we will be able to get that done within the first 30 days. As we will be able to schedule fresh eyes reviews on those hot clients, those ones that you are concerned about. So the clients that you've mentioned to us as part of the discussion, we will get those scheduled and have fresh eyes moving forward. Now, as we discussed the 30-day expectations, the one that concerns us is the attitude and action training and having that scheduled in the first 2 regions. Bonnie, we would like to defer that to 90 days, and our rationale is simply that in the 7 regions that you have, we want to be absolutely sure that we're working and focusing on the regions that are most important, most critical to this process. We want to get those people involved that can literally be the disciples and kind of the cheerleaders for this process. So with your agreement, we'd like to move that to the 90-day period.
That sounds reasonable.
Fantastic. Now, moving on to 90 days. Now, we'll handle each of their priorities in this manner, having an open, candid conversation about what we can and can't do, and we'll come to an agreement with our clients. While you can count on us to meet your expectation regarding training your client-facing reps and providing any remedial training in that year 1, There are two things in the first year that we really need to talk with you about. Marty, the first one I'll direct to you since it came as one of your key expectations, and that was Tenacity's ability to provide a 2-to-1 return in year one on the investment that you have in us. As Steve and I have talked it over with Randy, we believe that we can provide that 2-to-1 return, but it won't be in the first year. And there are a number of reasons for that, which we can go into. But in that first year, we're doing an awful lot of training, working with your organization to change the culture, et cetera, and you really don't see the change in attrition until year 2. So with your concurrence, what we'd like to do is move that measure from year 1 to year 2 in terms of that return. Acceptable to you?
Yes.
All right. Bonnie, relative to the tracking legislative activity, to be very frank with you, that is simply outside the scope of what we do. That is not part of the agreement, and we certainly do not have the expertise or the personnel to monitor Congress and provide that to you. So politely, we're going to have to say we simply don't do that.
Well, I understand. Maybe you could work with us, though, to help guide us to someone who could help us in that regard.
You have our agreement to do that, and we'll be happy to find a service and a resource that will provide that for you.
Great.
Now, once we have all the client's expectations dealt with, it's time for us to switch gears. It's time for us to ensure that we have a right client under the right terms. It's time for us to share our expectations of them. Now, in order for Tenacity to successfully meet your expectations of us, it's equally important that you, as NewCo's management team, understand our expectations of you. And in that regard, as we bring the meeting to a close, I'd like to share the expectations Tenacity has of you. Our first expectation is a simple one, and that is to be paid in full and on time according to the agreement. Is there any reason that you at NewCo cannot meet this expectation? Fantastic. Now, our second expectation, Bonnie, has to do with you and the need for you to remain engaged over this 2-year period. As you know, Tenacity practices what it preaches. And one of our key right client, right terms criteria is that the senior executive remain engaged and fully committed to this effort. Now, do we have your assurance that you will remain engaged over the life of this agreement together?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Moving on.
That's the transition meeting, but our job's not over. In fact, our job has just begun. It's important now to document our successes. If you've read the book, you know our failures will document themselves. You know, there's a business leader who we respect, whose mantra is communicate precisely, activate aggressively, follow up relentlessly. Well, the transition meeting is all about communicating precisely. We've done that with the client's expectations, and they understand ours now too. Activating aggressively, that's what the operators do. They do their job and they do it well. And following up relentlessly, that's the job of the account manager. We have 30-day, 90-day, and 1-year commitments. And it's time to keep those commitments and report back against those commitments. Everybody at the meeting today doesn't have to be at those 30-day and 90-day follow-up meetings, but they should all be back at the 1-year meeting. That's time to finish that 1-year expectation list and begin the planning for year 2.
Steve and I would like to thank you for watching the transition meeting video. And on behalf of our partners here in the U.S. and around the world, we'd like to say simply thanks. And as you begin to think of your own transition meetings, we encourage you to look at the workbooks that have been provided. And I think, Steve, we've done hundreds of these things over the past 30 years. I guarantee you we have never done one without having all of the answers to the questions in that pre-planning form. So take a look at the workbook. It's there to help you. It has replete with letters, templates, etc., and can get you ready for your own transition meeting. So thanks again for watching one of our 4 Cornerstone videos. We appreciate it.
Thank you.